All right, I've got a awesome guest on today's show. We're talking book of the day. One of my favorite book of the days is about Jeff Bezos, how he built Amazon.com into one of the great companies, not just of our time, but maybe of all time. The book is The Everything Store: Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon. And I'm very happy to be speaking with Brad Stone, who wrote the book. A lot of time put into it, and we're just going to go and learn about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And those of you listening, this applies whether you're an entrepreneur now, whether you're dreaming of bigger things. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Ty. Thanks for having me.
So what I like to do with these is just jump in. I always like to eat the dessert first. I break the rules. So my favorite story about Jeff Bezos, and you cover this in the book. There's quite a few, but let's start with you're Jeff Bezos. You have a nice job. You're comfortable. It's the 1990s, and you go, "Do I quit my job?" And am I right that he borrowed some money from his parents, 70 grand or something like that, and then kind of broke off and did his own thing? And I saw a video where he said the regret minimalization framework, where he was talking on YouTube, and he said, I knew that even if it failed, and I lost the money and lost the time and didn't have my job, at least I wouldn't grow old regretting and seeing someone else live out my dream. At least I knew I tried it myself.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's interesting to tell this story because it's worth noting here that this is almost one of the origin stories for businesses on the internet. I mean, we are talking here 1994, so more than 20 years ago. Netscape hadn't even gone public. The internet is something that only geeks know about. The World Wide Web has actually just really been invented and is starting to take off. And Jeff is a vice president, a very successful young vice president at an investment bank called D.E. Shaw. It was actually what was known as a quantitative hedge fund. So it was almost a technology company in New York City that used supercomputers and algorithms to make trades, to make very profitable trades. It was a very secretive company. And its founder, David Shaw, was a former computer science professor at Columbia, and he basically loved Jeff, and he put Jeff in charge of looking at new business opportunities. And Bezos, came up with a couple of things. In conjunction with his colleagues, but he noticed that the web was growing very quickly, and he started to think about the possibilities, of building a store online. What could you sell in this new medium? And we all know that Amazon started with books, but he didn't necessarily have books at the top of the list. He made a list of all sorts of things, music. Videos, movies. It was, of course, VHS at the time, or DVDs were just starting off, electronics, clothes. But there was something that really worked well with books, among other things. They're commodities, so you kind of know what you're getting when you order a book wherever.
Right.
And then he kind of had to make this decision. Does he start it with David Shaw, inside the Shaw, or does he take a risk? And this is at the time where, entrepreneurship is not as heralded as it is now, and starting an internet company is not this, this prized cultural accomplishment. And so, yeah, Bezos back then took a big risk. He told David Shaw that he wanted to go do this himself. It wasn't necessarily a very amicable breakup. Bezos had some resources, but certainly not enough. So
How
he
much
did
was he
borrow some money
making?
from.
How much do you think he was making at his job? Because a lot of people ask me, Ty, what if I'm making good money where I am? He was making good money, right?
I'm sure he was, and I don't know. I can't remember what exactly was, but the big Wall Street bonus probably kicked his compensation up. If not to the high six figures, the low seven figures, and he's 30 years old at the time. So. Enormously successful. So he was giving a lot up. He had an apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. He had just gotten married, and yet, he really loved and prized other entrepreneurs. He is a voracious reader, and he followed the careers of Thomas Edison and other great inventors, and he wanted to start something himself, and so he took the risk.
Let's talk about that for a second because you hit on my second point I want to discuss. So, first point, and you have this quote in the book that says by Jeff Bezos, when you're 80 years old and in a quiet moment of reflection, narrating for only yourself the most personal version of your life story, the telling that will be the most compact and meaningful will be the series of choices you have made. In the end, we are our choices. That's his commencement speech at Princeton in 2010. And so you see there, I call those crossroads events. He's working at this New York, Wall Street firm, making good money, 30 years old, and he is now happy for the choice to, the what is the old saying? I was going through the woods and I met two paths, and I took the path less trod upon, and I'm so much happier for. I butchered
it.
It.
Has made all the difference.
Yeah, I think that's Frost that said that, and so.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where the paths diverged for him, and he, it wasn't clear what the right thing to do was. Certainly, his parents, his friends, other people told him that the much safer thing was to stay in New York and remain working for this very very successful hedge fund. Actually, the funny thing is that later in the 90s, D.E. Shaw kind of sailed into some trouble, and at the same time, Jeff by then was a billionaire. So it turns out that the riskier path was the right call.
And now that leads me to the second point I was saying, and this show is kind of a book of the day show. I read books, talk about them, and you're helping me get more in depth. So thanks for that. And one of the things I love to see in a book is about a great person like Jeff Bezos reading and how instrumental that was. And I remember in your book, one of the great nuggets I took away was how much Jeff Bezos read Sam Walton's book called Made in America, and that's one of the books I recommend entrepreneurs read. And he had tattered copy full of notes that he was always reading and going back through. Can you speak a little bit on those mentors that he got through books, and also if you know any in person would be awesome to hear about?
Right. Well, the main thing to take away is that there's a culture of reading at Amazon. So they have book groups, and it's often the books that they've read as a team that have made the most impact on the organization. So you mentioned Sam Walton's Made in America. Obviously, I think very early on that was incredibly important. There are some other books that I kind of detail. I actually have an appendix at the end of the book that talks about what some of the most important books for Amazon have been. There's one called The Mythical Man Month that talks about how to organize small software groups. It's an old book by a guy named Frederick Brooks, and why small teams in software are important, and why as you scale an engineering team, it actually gets more unwieldy and less productive the more people you add to it. So it's a kind of counterintuitive insight that has led to a big cultural shift at Amazon. They have these things called 2 pizza teams that are going to be small enough to feed the team at night with 2 pizzas, and that comes really from reading. In one chapter, I detail the entire history of the very profitable AWS division at Amazon. That's Amazon Web Services. It's their pioneering cloud computing division, and that came in large part from an insight from a book by a game designer. So there's some personal books that Bezos drew great inspiration from, and then there are some books that he got his company to read that kind of contribute to the successful company we see today.
Yeah, I always say, there's kind of a myth. There's some truth to it, but there's always this myth that all the truth lies within if you can only look within. But, human language, all of us, that we've been born on a desert island, within us wasn't the ability to know English. There's so many things that are only learned from outside sources, and people, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett were both asked in separate interviews if they could have one superpower, what would it be? And they both answered the same answer, was to be the fastest reader. And so I always find Jeff Bezos not only read a lot, but he, for varying reasons, said, let's launch a business around books. So he's close to my heart in that I like that mentality. Now let's talk about the aggressiveness, because for myself, and these shows, even though I put these out for the public, I originally started these just to gain insight for myself, and I've tested in myself being passive versus being aggressive in life and in business, specifically in business. And as you read your book, Jeff Bezos was very aggressive, maybe to a fault at points, but it made him who he was. There's that story about the diaper company that he wanted to buy and they wouldn't sell to him. And he said, look, either sell to me or I'm going to come in. And he said, we're going to underprice diapers. And one of his employees, I think, said something like, if we underprice this much, we'll lose hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And he said, I don't care. He was aggressive at growing his business when he wanted to. Can you speak on the good and bad, or not the, I don't like to speak, let's change the words. What you would do in your own life, what you took away positively about aggression versus what you would maybe shy away from?
Well, let me start by positing that Amazon has grown as an organization. It's grown as an acquirer. It has evolved. So the things that were true 10 years ago, 5 years ago, may not be as true today, but they're instructive, and I think people in technology, Amazon is secretive, and it has this mystique, and people don't necessarily understand it that well, and Amazon hasn't really cultivated a great understanding of itself because it sees the opportunity before it as so large that they want to fly under the radar because they're in a foot race to win the 21st century retail landscape. So, but a little background in the late 90s, Amazon was a voracious acquirer and did a horrible job. It did a horrible job partnering with companies and acquiring companies. It was just a mess all around. They lost a ton of money during the dot-com boom, and they almost went out of business in the dot-com bust. And then really for most of the 2000s, they really kept to themselves. They did not acquire a lot. They didn't acquire, many big companies as Google was buying the likes of YouTube and DoubleClick. Amazon was really doing almost nothing. But as Amazon Prime kicked in, as the numbers started to get better from that near-death experience, they did start kind of reaching out into some new markets. And yeah, they were fairly predatory. So in the book, I talk about Amazon's pursuit of a company called Quidsi. It owned the Diapers.com brand. This is 2008, 2009. The numbers were starting to look good. Amazon wasn't making a ton of money, but the faithful investors could see that this was working. And the folks at Quidsi, who ironically have started a new company called Jet.com, they wanted to have nothing to do with Amazon. Customers loved them. And you're right. Amazon just undercut them, started a program called Amazon Mom, really gutted the profitability out of that segment. And basically, prove to other e-commerce entrepreneurs that you can't out Amazon. You can't sell commodities as Amazon does for low prices based on good customer service and rapid shipping and hope that Amazon's not going to notice. So, Quidsi, tried to fight the good fight. The profitability evaporated in part because of the financial crisis, in part because of the Amazon price cutting, and they ended up selling. And then those founders from Diapers.com left and are now fighting Amazon again. So there's some great intramural warfare there. But the lesson is that Amazon can be fairly hard-nosed, and we've seen that not only in its acquisitions, but its dealings with book publishers, and that's a separate topic, and I think Amazon has kind of softened its behavior there too. But for many years, book publishers thought Amazon was just very difficult to deal with, just out for almost nothing other than a very low price on a digital book, and it was gutting the economics of the physical book business. Book chains, independent bookstores were going out of business, and you saw that played out in years of warfare with Apple and an antitrust lawsuit against Apple and the book publishers. A very long story, but the bottom line, Tai, is that Amazon could be a pretty hard-nosed and ruthless competitor.
Do you think so? Let's talk. I read an interesting book called The Self-Made Billionaire Effect, and so these researchers went out and they said, what makes people a billionaire? And the final conclusion was it's habits of the mind. They isolated for things like where you were born and the advantages you had, and they said in their opinion, it came to that. So do you think the aggressiveness is somewhat a habit of the mind that defines just who Jeff Bezos is? So if someone's listening, person listening can go, all right, maybe I've been a little bit too passive in life, and if I want to knock things out, I better jump on it. No one's going to do it for me, and maybe a little aggression won't hurt me.
Well, it's funny when I study folks like Jeff Bezos or read about or report on the habits and behaviors of great CEOs like a Steve Jobs. I do kind of worry that maybe some people will be drawing the long lessons. These guys are very difficult at meetings. They suffer no fools. They can lash out at colleagues. They strike a good amount of fear in the people around them. And that's tied up in the aggressiveness. But, it works because it goes hand in hand with inspiration and intuition. And it works when, it works because they're right. Like Steve Jobs was right about digital music and smartphones, and Jeff Bezos has been right about e-commerce and cloud computing. So I would say the aggressiveness and the sort of personal, kind of sharp elbows is something that maybe some people should adopt, but it works because they're inspiring figures, and they were startup founders, and Jobs, got fired and came back, and they had these incredibly difficult paths, but I would say like the personality quirks are kind of, they don't work for everybody. In
Right.
fact, they don't work for most people. Like that aggressiveness is just going to turn folks off unless it's really joined at the hip with a kind of magical ability to intuit where markets are going.
So the rule maybe is, if you're really good and really right, like take a Michael Jordan, you can be a little bit edgy. But if you're not at that level, you might get a lot of blowback on you.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, and then that kind of corporate behavior that Amazon has exhibited in the book business. Let's just take, where it's no secret that most folks in the publishing industry for a very long time resented the heck out of Amazon.
Right.
That approach has really only worked for Amazon because it has been coupled with a very straightforward customer-centric approach. So if Amazon was doing all this to book publishers while raising prices for books and ebooks, then I think they'd probably be the subject of an antitrust,
Right.
investigation. But because it's been coupled with this, incessant focus on lowering the price for books and expanding opportunity for unpublished authors, officially, the Justice Department has stayed away because it seems like it's been good for consumers. And customers, you hear people complaining about Amazon, and then you ask to see their account, and it turns out that they're a Prime member spending hundreds of dollars a month.
Yeah.
So, we're all sort of addicted to it, even if we acknowledge that some of the behavior has been tough on competitors.
Yeah. Now, one of the great chapters in this book, I read the physical book, and I also have it on iBooks. I have it. So on the iBook, it's page 502. And you talk about one of the men who worked with Jeff Bezos was a guy with the last name Dalzell. And you say, Dalzell watched Amazon from afar and marveled at how Bezos turned himself into one of the world's most admired corporate chiefs. Jeff does a couple of things better than anyone I've ever worked for. So here's the two things I'd love to hear your elaboration on. Number one, they said about Jeff Bezos, he embraces the truth. A lot of people talk about the truth, but they don't engage their decision making around the best truth at the time. And the second thing is he's not tethered by conventional thinking. What's amazing to me is he's bound only by the laws of physics. He can't change those. Everything else he views as open to discussion. So how does this, and I just talked to Ashley Vance, who wrote and had exclusive access to Elon Musk. Same kind of story. I read a book by this co-author with Stephen Hawking, Blada now. I think it's called The Upright Thinker. And he says, the way to think like Einstein is to imagine that you're an alternate universe of infinite possibilities. Then you build that, and then I mean, then you plan that way, and then you come back to the real world and try to adjust. And that's a little bit like this. He's only bound by a few laws. So it's unconventionality, but also no delusion. You know, if you love the truth, that means you're willing to say, "This is my baby. I've launched this division of my company, but it's not working, so I'm gonna shut it down." Most people can't do that.
Yeah, that's right. And the way Bezos puts it is with a phrase called stubborn on vision, flexible on details. And, there are a couple examples throughout Amazon's history of where, as Dalzell said, he kind of embraced the best truth at the time. One is the famed Amazon distribution network, where, they've had a couple of iterations of it over the years. The goal has always been to do very rapid delivery and to relieve customers of the cost of shipping. And they started out by putting big distribution centers in the middle of nowhere, basically to get tax breaks and to avoid paying sales tax in the most populous states. And over time, they've adjusted. Right? They've kind of thrown out the old strategy. They've stubbornly reached deals to pay sales tax in places like California and New York State, and then they've moved distribution centers out of the boondocks and into the periphery of cities, and in some cases right in smack middle of cities. There's a small distribution center in Midtown Manhattan across from the Empire State Building. So stubborn on the vision of rapid, inexpensive delivery, and then flexibility on how you're going to do it, or the best truth at the time. Like another good example is as drone technology has kind of matured. We all thought it was a PR stunt, but Bezos was thinking very hard, working towards delivering products in the air over our heads via drones. And it's because, he's embraced this truth that this stuff is getting better, and one day it's going to be used to deliver packages.
Yeah, and most people, the average person goes, "That's impossible," and they stop right there. Whereas he goes, "Is this a law of physics? Could I deliver through the air with little robot drones?" If the answer is yes, then it's on the table no matter how absurd. And that's, they call that extraordinary imaginative vision. And billionaires are are in possession of this at higher levels than the population at large. So, when I read a book like this, I go, "Tai, be careful of saying you can't do it," because what ends up happening is someone else does it, then you feel stupidly. It's like Netflix. Think about, I always say
Right.
Netflix, Reed Hastings comes in, and it's in hindsight, you're like, "Oh, this is obvious. This is easy." Tesla, Elon Musk, electric cars. People said, "Oh, well, there's not enough charging stations." He said, "Well, once I build the cars and people adopt them, they'll start putting them in." Now everywhere in LA has charging stations. So you look 20 years from now, your kids will look back and go, "You mean you doubted that there would be charging stations? Like, come on."
Right.
And it's probably the same with Jeff Bezos. It's like, "Oh, you doubted that there'd be drones?" But now, which reminds me of this question of fear and doubt. What are some of the things that he had to deal with when he was starting out? Any stories on people going, "This is going to fail," the naysayers, and how he dealt with them?
Yeah, there really have been naysayers at every step of the Amazon story. I mean, even today, as people point incessantly to its failure to make a lot of profit. But early on, it was, there were different rounds of disbelievers, and I would say, early on, people thought eBay was a much kind of less frictionful way to deliver products bought online, because the sellers were going to be responsible for shipping. You didn't need to build the big distribution centers. And then you had a round of naysayers during the dot-com bust that just thought Amazon was over-leveraged and was going to go out of business. And the stock went from, the hundreds to the single digits. And, publications like Barron's were putting Amazon.bomb on the cover. And Bezos was sort of a piñata. And then you had Amazon in the age of Google, 2005, 2006 during the Google IPO, and that's a much better business model. And Amazon was losing a lot of engineers. Google was seen as a merrier place to work. So it's been kind of incessant. And Bezos, among many things, has been a brilliant strategist in figuring out at every step of the way what Amazon's kind of core advantages are, why it's beloved by its customers, and then how to kind of double down on those advantages and expand out from there.
What are some of those advantages?
Well, they've got they've got a great reputation, right? Their customers tend to like them, and it's because it relieves them of the need to go to the store and the park and to joust for items that may not be on the shelves. Amazon has hundreds of millions of credit cards. That's something that Google doesn't necessarily have. Apple has via iTunes. Facebook doesn't really have. So there's that advantage. And then the fulfillment centers. That thing that everybody thought was a disadvantage in the battle against eBay in the 90s. Well, it turns out that a million mom and pop shops or hobbyists aren't all that good at packaging up items and sending them off in the mail. And that Amazon developed a real core competency. I mean, I would say this is the number one Amazon advantage. They know they're very adept, the most in the world, at centralizing inventory, storing it around the country, and then packaging it up, sometimes with automation, sometimes with low-wage laborers, packaging it up and getting it to your doorstep in the quickest and most inexpensive time possible.
It's insane how fast.
That's core advantage. Everybody's pursuing that, and Amazon's well ahead.
Yeah, Amazon, it's amazing. Here in LA, I think they're almost doing same-day shipping. Like I'll order something and I'll get it maximum the next morning if I order at 3 p.m. It's I know in big cities they're even accelerating these pickup stores and things like that. Now, one quick thing, going back to the habit of the mind Jeff Bezos maintains, what in the midst, so if somebody's listening and they're thinking about doing something new, I found, I think it was Gandhi that said, at first they ignore you, then they hate you, then, finally they love you. Most people struggle with that early stage where you're not successful enough to say, I told you so, but you're visible enough to your friends, family, acquaintances, competitors that people start saying stuff to you. What do you think was his trick to maintaining his vision? Is he just stubborn? Is he good at ignoring? Does he not read the paper? Does any kind of insight there on personally how to deal with those kind of challenges?
Yeah. I think it was his knowledge of the business and his optimism about it. And we see the same thing right now with companies like Uber and Airbnb. On the one hand, the outsiders, are they're looking at maybe the broader economic environment, the direction of the stock price. These are not really indications of the health of the business. This is effect, not cause. And Bezos, at every step of the way, I think, knew that he had a better mousetrap, a better way for people to buy, and that customers were responding to it. And so, he's looking at numbers like free cash flow and, customer accounts and the average monthly spend. And these, have been numbers that have been going up for 20 years for Amazon because customers find it to be a compelling experience that fulfills its promises. And I think that has always given him a belief that this was going to work and that it was going to, create the flexibility for Amazon to go and try new things and build and diversify into other markets. Now, did the confidence waver at times, and did Jeff and his colleagues kind of hide it? I'm sure that they did. In 2000, 2001, did they really believe that they had escape velocity? That was partly going to be in a function of the broader kind of willingness of investors, to keep funding this grand experiment. If everything had turned sour and Amazon suppliers had kind of called their accounts in and wanted to be paid immediately instead of in a couple of months, then Amazon could have been in trouble. So they skated close to doom it a couple of times. But Bezos has always been super optimistic. I mean, I think he believes that, you create a compelling service and you keep prices low and you deliver quickly, the customers are going to love it. And the fact is that I would say mass market chain retail has never really been certainly Walmart has done a great job of like keeping prices down, but the merchandise is cheap and the shopping environment is kind of, and this might be expressing a personal viewpoint, but sort of hellish,
right?
Particularly during the holidays, and so to stay home and to click and to have it show up in the next day or two is a pretty seductive experience.
Yeah, I think one of the great, so going back to what we were just talking about is it's singular vision. I have a friend here who is one of the heads of a big studio, makes a lot of, I think he won 2 Academy Awards, his studio last year, and I asked him, what's the key to a good movie? And he said singular vision and keeping your eye on the ball when the chaos is all around you, focusing. Or as Michael Jordan's psychologist told me, he said Michael Jordan's secret was eye of a hurricane. The more the hurricane is storming and blowing, the cooler under pressure Michael Jordan got. And I think Jeff Bezos, just from reading your book, definitely has that same attribute. And one of the things, kind of a unique thing, I don't know if he got this from Sam Walton's book, because Sam Walton lists as top 10 things to do, customer first. And you talk about how Jeff Bezos, I think it was a product on Amazon that was like healthcare, but it was sex toys or something. And there was one complaint and from a customer wrote in that got like maybe a conservative housewife or something wrote in and said, how come I getting porn stuff from Amazon? And Jeff Bezos was basically ready to shut down $100 million division around one customer complaint, because he checks Jeff@Amazon.com. You can email him. So he's so attentive to the point of 1 or 2 customers giving him valid feedback, he'll change the whole ship. I mean, that's pretty amazing level of attention.
Yeah, that's right. And the story there was it was someone who had purchased lubricants on Amazon and then had gotten a marketing email that you sometimes get from Amazon. Hey, you searched for lubricants. You might also like this stuff. And so Jeff thought, well, why are we embarrassing our customers? Shouldn't we turn off email marketing for certain sensitive categories? And so he kind of raised holy hell inside the organization about the limits and the efficacy of email marketing. And he was right there, and you didn't need a volume of complaints to know that you probably shouldn't embarrass your customers. But 2, it's a way that he, monitoring his own email inbox and taking little anecdotes, in addition to using data to make the site and the services better, using anecdotes is a way that he kind of spread his input across what is now just a massive organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. He can't get knee deep into everything, and so he kind of selectively audits the organization, and he does it with these emails. And when he sees something that's wrong, he uses it as an opportunity to go and to drive some change and to like kind of tussle with the fundamental values of that particular part of the company. So in this case, it was this was like maybe we shouldn't be sending email marketing to the sexual kind of health category of Amazon, but it was also an opportunity to go and kind of rethink, all right, what are the values of email marketing and how much should we be using it? So, it's his way to kind of disperse his time and his vision, and it's also a way to make sure that the company always continues to listen to customers.
Yeah, I think it's Sam Walton said the best style of management if you're an entrepreneur is over the shoulder, meaning let people do their thing, but every once in a while, spot check. And I think, like you said, that's why Jeff Bezos is checking his checking email just to double check that there's nothing slipping through the cracks. Now, next thing that I wrote, one of the greatest lines in here, and I've said this to my staff a lot, talking about workload, because one of the big issues germane to all humans is, how do I balance work and play and family and working out and all this stuff. And there's in the ebook or the Apple book, page 169 says, during one memorable meeting of employees, a female employee pointedly asked Bezos when Amazon was going to establish a better work-life balance. He didn't take that well. The reason we are here is to get stuff done. That is the top priority. That is the DNA of Amazon. If you can't excel and put everything into it, this might not be the place for you. So he clearly, maybe some people would perceive him as a workaholic. What is your take on that approach and how it applies, not just to Jeff Bezos, but what's the takeaway for people listening to today's show?
Well, great CEOs, particularly startup CEOs and entrepreneurs, are going to demand as much from everyone around them as they do from themselves. And it's signing up for this was said in the 90s. I think Amazon's a little different today as a mature company, although certainly they're required to work hard. But he didn't abide discussions of work-life balance. He wanted all his soldiers on the field, and that was tough for people. And this was this was before the kind of culture of Silicon Valley spread across the business world. And Amazon lost a lot of early people, and maybe they didn't quite know what they were signing in for. But there was a lot of turnover over the first 2 decades of Amazon, probably more so than some other internet companies, and it was because of the culture, and the fact that it was supposedly work hard, play hard, but it was really work hard, and Jeff drove a hard culture. So again, it's one of those things that that founder entrepreneur, the guy who started it, who put everything on the line, and whose bets have paid off in a masterful way for employees and investors. And there are only a few folks like that in the world, like a Zuckerberg or a Steve Jobs or Larry Page or Jeff Bezos. They can get away with it, because they inspire their people. And so, when Bezos said that, maybe it was a little early, but he inspires his employees, and they kind of live and work to please him, and so he uses that power by really motivating his employees and getting everyone to work hard. Even though this is a company with over 100,000 employees, in some way they're more entrepreneurial and have more startup pace than any other company in retail.
I think that for me, I call it the front-loading effect. What you want to do in life, and this is based on an ancient proverb from thousands of years ago, that says it's good to bear the yoke in your youth. Talking about, cattle, oxen used to have a yoke on them to do heavy work. And if you look at the pattern, whether it be Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates has a similar one. Bill Gates says from age 20 to age 30, I basically locked myself in a room, and he said he didn't take one day off in 10 years. But at the end game, anybody listening to this, which of us wouldn't exchange age 20 to age 30 hard work on something important to be worth multi-billions of dollars? It's a pretty good trade-off. So this is as long as your workload goes down over time, like you said, Amazon has evolved. I'm sure people aren't working as hard as they were when they were in a garage, or that type of setting. So I always say, don't be afraid of hard work as long as it tapers off eventually. Joel Salatin, my first mentor, used to say, Tai, a man can do anything as long as it's not forever.
Exactly. Well, and I think one of the lessons and one of the reasons why it's been so fun to study Bezos over the years is he has gotten better at managing his time and his increasing workload and expanding his influence. And so, the reason why he's been able to do things like buy the Washington Post or start a space company on the side is he's just very strategic about his own time and efforts and impact. And my sense is he keeps innovating it, and I'm not close enough to have great examples, but I kind of can guess. Like, he keeps innovating against his own schedule, constantly making sure that he's doing things as efficiently as possible. A great example that I can give you is early on, he basically said he wasn't going to do any more one-on-one meetings with his direct reports. He didn't find them to be useful, or they were over-consumed with political matters. And so basically, the common meeting environment at Amazon is going to be like the S team, so that's the senior team, and they meet and meetings are started by everybody reading a document that has been pre-prepared by whoever is orchestrating the meeting or presenting. And these are called narratives, and they're very strict styles at Amazon. And everyone sits in silence and reading the document. Jeff probably reading it for the first time, and then there's a discussion afterward. And again, this is basically Jeff over the course of 15 years refining the process for digesting information and having a valuable discussion about it. And everyone's style is going to be different. Jeff, I think, prefers to take in information through reading. He's a great reader, and so that's why the style has been developed at Amazon, and it's probably different for other CEOs and founders at other companies. But it's really this great triumph of time management, which allows Bezos to continue to work hard, but have 4 kids and all these companies on the side.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that he requires, isn't it like a 6-page document you have to write up or something and
That's
well
right.
written?
With footnotes, and execs and employees at Amazon spend great chunks of their year preparing for the narrative that they're going to show to Bezos in an S-team meeting.
What else about his daily schedule? Because that's one of the big questions people ask me about my life and about entrepreneurs. He's got 4 kids. What is his daily schedule? Is he early riser? Is he, do you know? And I'm sure that's changed over time too.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about it, but it may even have changed since I published the book. But I know that one day a week he spends at Blue Origin, a space company. Twice a year, there are these deep reviews at Amazon where the entire S team kind of audits all the different parts of the business. I think the week starts with a senior team meeting where they review the business. It's very data centric. I know. I remember witnessing this. Mackenzie, Jeff's wife, dropping him off at work, so they still drive to work every day. And but as he has as his wealth has risen, he's gotten very secretive. So it's kind of hard to discern too much. I know. I can tell you this: he seems to do less and less media interviews over time. So that is definitely not a big part of his regular schedule anymore.
And you were saying, going back to those meetings that he does, you're saying he doesn't like to meet one-on-one because he feels like people are going to come in and say, oh, you should get rid of so-and-so. Oh, you should promote me. So he's like, let's just meet where it's safer for me in a larger group. Is that kind of the mentality?
I think that's right. I mean, I just think it wasn't making a meaningful impact on the business. He didn't feel it was a great way to spend his time. I'm sure some one-to-one meetings still happen among Jeff and key employees, but it was very early on where he just felt like wasn't like a great use of his time. Again, constantly innovating against his own schedule and against the culture of the company and finding ways to make it more efficient. And I don't think even 20 years into the company that's changed. I think they continue to do things. If anything, Amazon's been a great innovator in e-commerce and in the cloud, but also in terms of corporate culture and corporate productivity. I think he would probably see that as one of the great kind of platforms where Amazon innovates and they continue to try new things.
Now, as we kind of wrap up here, missed opportunities. I always tell people, Jeff Bezos was at a crossroads in '94, and he obviously took a road that, in hindsight, was the road that almost all humans would have liked to have taken, the one that gets you to $40+ billion. But there's a story. I'm pretty sure it's in your book. I couldn't find it earlier. The story of a person, I think it was a lawyer, who had the opportunity to invest, and what was it? The lawyer was supposed to sell a barn or something. I think that.
That's right. I remember. Yeah.
Can you tell that
Well,
missed opportunity story?
his father got sick. I can't remember his name, and it's funny because today in Silicon Valley there are lots of angel investors that missed on Uber, missed on Airbnb, and there were Jeff had a very hard time raising the initial capital for Amazon, and there was this one lawyer who his dad had a farm and his dad got sick, and while Jeff had asked if he wanted to invest in Amazon, and the time wasn't right. This guy was consumed with family matters, and and tells the story now with a bit of regret. But it's one of those things, like, you never know, right? When you see these opportunities, and you've got this crazy entrepreneur who seems very driven, but the idea seems kooky. And back then, it was selling books online. Jeff wasn't talking about having an everything store, but you never know, and these are, we always hear about the success stories, so it's kind of fun to talk about when investors were kind of faced with a life-changing opportunity, and because of circumstance missed it.
So it was a lawyer friend of his that he said bring like 80 or 100 grand. Was that right? How'd the story go?
That's something like, he was able to kind of calculate what that early, maybe $50,000 investment would have turned into, and of course it was ultimately multiple millions.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was actually kind of too hard on himself, because you just don't know in the moment. Sometimes the entrepreneur is like a Bezos or a Travis Kalanick at Uber. They seem crazy. They are crazy, but it turns out it's the kind of crazy that builds multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah, the way I look, Charlie Munger, the business partner of Warren Buffett, says, remember, there's no great tragedy in other people making money faster than you. It's always going to happen. There's always somebody that will miss out, that some opportunity that you'll miss out on. I recently, as an investor, was approached by a business to, I forget what percentage I was going to get, but it wasn't in my area of competence, so I didn't invest, and the business has gone, massive explosion in the last 3 months. But I never think that way. I think what Charlie Munger says, and I think, this lawyer who missed the opportunity hopefully thinks, is that you focus on what you know, and if you're lucky, you'll get multiple opportunities in life. And so one thing I have learned, though, is don't ever tell somebody, oh, this is a stupid idea and it's never going to work. You don't want to be on that side of the story of,
That's right.
You're in the book where the guy goes, this is the guy who said I would never make it, and here I am, I started Uber or whatever like that.
And maybe another lesson is, every so often, listen to intuition, even if logic is telling you otherwise. And one of the things I would imagine early on about Bezos is that he was showing a little flash of genius and a really kind of compelling devotion to the idea. And I think that's, for the folks that did get on board early on, they recognize that this is a smart guy who's gonna roll with the punches and adjust where he had to adjust, and build something that is really to be treasured. And I think that's what Bezos has done over the past 2 decades.
You have a great quote in there, because one of the things that you can, for sure, you can that Jeff Bezos embodies is persistence. You have this line where a guy, Jeff Wilkie, says, it turned out that most of the things, Jeff Wilkie said, I thought it was going to be difficult and disruptive, and I was skeptical that it was the right use of our resources to manufacture. I think they're talking about the devices, the
making
ebooks.
The first Kindle,
yeah. And it said, it turned out that most of the things I predicted would actually happen, but we still powered through it because Jeff is not deterred by short-term setbacks. And I think I read an article that said the average person, about 50% of people will quit after one short-term setback. By the time you have 2 short-term setbacks, about 70% have quit. And by 3 setbacks, 90% of people will quit. But he's certainly a persistent guy, it seems like.
Oh yeah, and the origin story of the Kindle is just a great example. They worked on that for years and years. When it came out, it was it ran out of supply. It took probably, from the inception of the idea to the Kindle becoming a mainstream business, that's 6 years. And yeah, Bezos was tenacious, and the underlying belief was that books were going to at least partially go digital. And if anyone was going to invent that future, it had to be Amazon, because the brand was so tied up in books. And yeah, even his top lieutenants thought he was crazy, and he pushed ahead anyway.
All right, last question for you. As you read, researched this book and Jeff Bezos, if today was your last day on planet Earth and you wanted to leave something, a short little blurb of what you learned from Jeff Bezos and the Amazon store for your kids and mankind, what would that one nugget be?
I think the central insight that Bezos had when he started Amazon and D.E. Shaw was he was looking at the numbers for the World Wide Web, and he concluded that we live in a time of dramatic change. And I think right now you'd look at the numbers for cell phone usage or social network usage, and you'd say the same thing is true, that we are just in the beginning of a massive transformation of our economy and our lives. It's the beginning of like the formation of a technological society, to get kind of really dramatic about it, and that in these kinds of transformations, lots of new great things are going to be built because all the old rules are going away. And so I think the central insight of Amazon is we live at a time of great change. You can really create some amazing things, and I think that's true. That's going to be true for a while now. And so, to my kids who are still little babies, so they're not going to be starting businesses anytime soon. The lesson is maybe the old conventional paths in business or in media or really anywhere are no longer relevant. You can really try new things and invent new things and have fun and build things and try to make an impact on the world.
Awesome. So, Brad Stone, go out and get this book. You can get it, ironically, at Amazon. It's on my tailopez.com/books. It's on my recommended list of best books to read. It truly is it's a great book. The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon. Brad, any new books or other books that you've written that people should get? And what's the best way if people want to follow your stuff? What's your Twitter, website, or what do you like to hand out?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ty. Thanks for having me on the show. Twitter is twitter.com/Bradstone, very easy. And as for new projects, I write for Bloomberg Business Week. I've got the new cover story on Google's antitrust misadventures in Europe. That's, I hope, a pretty good read. And I'm always kind of thinking of new books and planning and plotting. And when the time is right, I'll definitely call you up and we'll do this again.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being on today's Book of the Day show, Grand Theory of Everything. Brad Stone, thanks so much. And
Thank you, Ty.
Go out there and do something that hasn't been done yet. The world needs good ideas and people who can do them.